There was a man. He went to San Francisco by himself when he was young. He was imprisoned 3 times, had 4 wives in different periods, became a hero 5 times, and won court cases 6 times. He had 8 sons, more than 40 grandsons and granddaughters. The man settled down in North America and lived up to 100 years old before he passed away peacefully, surrounded by his extended family and offsprings. Please welcome the 8 young Chinese Americans who will tell this heroic tale.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tang Restaurant Podcast. My name is Jason Tian. I'm 17 years old, and I will be reading part of this story for you. Gun Ma was statued at the tent of the Indians. His hands were still tied. After his dirty headgear was pulled off, he looked closely and saw a pair of high horse-skin boots in front of him. They were embroidered with a buffalo pattern. When he looked up, there was a middle-aged, brown-skinned man sitting in front of him wearing a war bonnet. He was the chief of the Shoshone tribe. He looked at Gun Ma lovingly and said, "Brown horse, my brown horse." The tribesmen followed suit and shouted, "Brown horse." After several times, Gun Ma knew that this was the new name he had been given. It turned out that after the chief fled to the western Nevada mountains with his clan, they found a place with a stream and settled there. He said that as long as the trees grow and the streams flow, the land is ours. More than 30 years ago, the United States Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, which legally encroached on the homes and lands of Indians that had been passed down from generation to generation. The government forced the Native Americans to move westward, and by the time of the Civil War, the Indians had become a minority on the land. But the chief Wolf Horse refused to evacuate from the homeland, and so his whole family was killed. Losing his entire family was very hard on him, and his health was not as strong as before. He couldn't understand why it had to be that way. Anyone could live on the same land, so why did the white people have to monopolize the land and drive the Indians away? The Indians lived according to the laws of nature. They changed places every few years. Let the land rest, and let the environment recover naturally before returning. Now, everything had changed. In order to comfort the chief, who was suffering from the loss of his beloved son, the tribe kidnapped Gun Ma and tried to make him the godson of the chief. Recently, there had been a lot of Asian faces at railway construction sites dozens of miles away, and the facial features of these people were quite similar to those of the Indians. The tribe hoped that the gift would cheer up the chief and bring the wolf horse they knew back. However, Gun Ma, who was under house arrest in the tent, said he'd rather die than stay there. No matter how patiently the chief gave him water, corn, or even tobacco, he spit it out and swore. Gun Ma used the iron nails he carried with him to untie the rope quietly and tried to escape from the tent, but was caught and almost killed. The clansmen tried to frighten him and told him to never think about running away. "As long as you are out, you will be eaten by wolves," they said. They surrounded Gun Ma and made wolf howls to scare him. In reality, the clansmen treated him very well. Gradually, Gun Ma learned that the tribe had been looted a few months ago. The chief was originally as tough as a wolf, but because he missed his son so dearly, one could say he was becoming more and more like a sheep. Gun Ma began to feel sympathy for the old chief. He thought of his own father when he saw Wolf Horse, so he decided to stay. And from then on, he began to learn their language and skills, like riding horses, hunting, fishing, and trapping rabbits. He also taught the Indians how to cook, make soup, or even build houses. Zuza, Gun Ma's fiancée, arrived in San Francisco after Gun Ma's disappearance half a year ago. Zuza had only received 2 letters from Gun Ma and his brother in the whole year she stayed in their hometown. The first letter said that they had been robbed as soon as they got off the ship and were trying hard to find the whereabouts of their father. The second said that Genshin signed a contract to build a railway for 3 years, but Gun Ma had suddenly disappeared. Zuza's mother was bedridden and worried sick. Zuza's cousin, Afang, who was waiting to get married, came to visit her aunt. She helped around the restaurant and took care of the housework. Zuza became anxious. Her parents arranged to have her marry Big He. His family couldn't wait to build her a diaolo and prepare a sedan chair to take her home. Zuza cried and blamed herself for her life. The Ma family is considered a wealthy family in the town. During an earthquake that happened a year ago, Jude's mother was smashed by debris and broke her spine, and she has been in constant pain since then. Jude's father couldn't bear to see his wife in such pain, so he gave her opium to relieve it. Unfortunately, she became addicted and couldn't live without it. After not too long, the family was in debt, and their clinic was closed. But in this critical moment, Big He sent enough money to relieve the funds and help them repay their debt, on the condition that Zuza would have to marry him. Zuza's eyes, ears, and heart were full of Gunmao, and she didn't even want to look at Big He with his hunched back and wrinkled face. Big He was the richest man in the region, and of course he wanted to marry the most beautiful woman in the town. But Zuza had pledged her love to Gunmao, who was all that she had. Big He had worked hard on the new house and couldn't wait to have Zuza as his wife, but Zuza took a few clothes and sneaked away over the wall of her home. She disguised as a man, arrived at Haikou Pier before dawn, boarded a boat to Hong Kong, and from there went to San Francisco on the other side of the ocean. Because she had Gunmao in her heart, she was not afraid to go out alone, and she had never thought about what was waiting for her on the other side. Wind's Mo Guanhua ship from Hong Kong finally arrived in San Francisco. After more than a month on the ocean, the passengers were about to land. They had sorted their clothes and were lined up for immigration inspection. As is customary, inspectors searched every passenger to see if they were carrying prohibited opium. Zuza was revealed to be a girl, and she had to stay on the boat with 20 other young women. They were all forbidden to disembark because the inspectors thought they might be slaves. Someone on the boat had just reported that a group of women had been abducted and sold as slaves when they arrived in San Francisco. At this time, the American Civil War had just ended, the Union Army had won against the Confederate Army, and slavery had been abolished. Any slave trafficking was now illegal. Using this as an excuse, inspectors detained the women on board and asked them to open their carry-on luggage for inspection. It turned out that other than some beautiful clothes in these women's suitcases, there were neither husbands nor children to accompany them. So what were they to do in San Francisco? The inspectors also had another reason to hold the women back. According to a report, there were often crimes against public decency and morality happening where a lot of Chinese gathered. The inspectors made a decision. These women could not go ashore. Unless the owner of the ship paid $500 for each passenger, the women would have to be sent back to where they came from. Of course, the owner of the boat couldn't pay the money. What was to be done? Zuza was terrified. She bought her own ticket, so she only had a silver dollar left. She desperately shouted, "Let me off the boat! I came to find my fiancé. He'll pay me the fee." The women were all taken to a room, and they didn't know what to do next. Akui, who was waiting to pick up someone on the shore, saw the women being taken away. He swore and waved his fists in frustration. "You can't cut corners. You can only go through legal procedures," he said. "What the heck?" Akui paid an expensive legal fee and hired lawyer Williams. Williams graduated from Columbia College with a law degree on the East Coast. After working in New York for a few years, gold was discovered in the West, so he came to open a gold mine and made a fortune. At times, he employed some Chinese and got to know their skills and strengths, and he was willing to help them. Later, he bought a piece of land in Oakland, ran real estate by himself, and bought shares in the Pacific Railroad Company. Lawyer Williams often has a poker face, so nobody knows what he's thinking. But when he said okay, Akui breathed a sigh of relief because he knew that this lawyer had helped many Chinese in lawsuits and rarely lost. At the moment he saw Zuza, Williams immediately knew that Zuza could represent all the women in the case. Zuza cried in court that she was looking for her fiancé. The judge asked, "What if we cannot find your fiancé?" And she replied, "Isn't there a laundromat? I can do laundry. If there is a Chinese medicine clinic, I can also help. Trust me, I'm not what you say." Thinking that she had come thousands of miles, only to suffer such insult, Zuza couldn't help but solve. When all the other women saw this, they also cried and started to share their own experiences and tried to prove their innocence. Zuza's innocent beauty ended up making the judges believe her. They had won the case, and 4 days later, all the women were permitted to go ashore. Akui was thinking, who had reported this to the authorities? He posted a $100 reward in Chinatown to track down the whistleblowers and was determined to kill them. Akui thanked the lawyer a lot, but the lawyer only said one thing. "If you let me know you abducted and sold these girls, you will go to hell. I don't want to see you again." Akwe first worked as a stand washer in a gold mine and made little money, but he had lost all of it due to gambling. Just when he was getting desperate, he suddenly discovered that there was a shortage of women in San Francisco and that the Chinese workers liked to gamble. He discovered this was a business opportunity. And Akwe borrowed some money, sent it to Guangdong, and asked a trafficker to help him buy some girls from poor families. He then shipped these girls from Hong Kong to San Francisco. When they were bought by human traffickers, they only cost us dozen silver dollars, but when the girls arrived in San Francisco, each of them was worth $200, and the most beautiful ones were worth almost $1,000. Akwe was the leader of the gang, and he controlled the group of women. Before they came to San Francisco, the traffickers signed a 4-year contract with them. Only the most beautiful, like Zuza, happened to be on the same boat without a contract. Akwe rudely stopped Zuza and said she had to pay $1,000 for the lawsuit. I paid $500 security deposit in advance and a legal fee of $500 for each of you. Now that you can go ashore, you must pay it back to me. Zuza said, I only have 2 silver dollars. Akwe said, there is no other way. You must work at my store. What does your store sell? What can I do? She asked. You don't have to do anything. Just sit near the door and help greet the guests, Akwe replied. Is there really such an easy task? She asked. Yes, because you are so beautiful, I am reluctant to let you work, he said. But I'm going to find my fiancé, she replied. You are just a girl. There are tens of thousands of men here. If you walk down the street, you will be eaten alive right away. You should come to my store first, and I will help you find him. When they arrived at Akwe's store, Zuza understood what was going on. She wanted to run, but the 4 security guards at the door stopped her. Akwe said with a smile, Don't be afraid. They are just protecting you. Sit at the window on the 2nd floor. I will draw a red line. Someone will come to see you. 5 minutes, $5. 10 minutes, $10. Once you earn $1,000, give it to me and you can leave. You are such a bad guy. Am I bad? I didn't do anything bad to you. I was gentle with you, and I found a good job for you. I'm your savior, okay? If it was anyone else, I would have heard thank you from you. So what do you want? I dare not do anything. You are too beautiful and caught my eye. I just want to protect you, not let anyone touch you, and of course, pay back my money as early as you can. I love money. Just think about it. Do you understand? If a man touches you, I will die for you. Don't worry. I am a man of my word, and no man will dare to touch you. Among the tens of thousands of Chinese in San Francisco, there are only 100 or so women. Now, suddenly, a group of young women had come, and the news spread to the mining area and railway construction site. And there, the young and middle-aged Chinese workers were very excited. It's really been too long not being able to sleep with my wife in my arms, one said. White women were absolutely not allowed to be touched, and most of the Chinese women in the streets were also working day and night. When you go shopping on off days in Chinatown, all you can see is a world of men with a gloomy face. The so-called suffering of going out is the most unspeakable kind of suffering. Among this group of women, the men heard that there was one listed as Shui Yue, a good-looking girl. They had never seen such a pretty woman in San Francisco. She was tall, with fair skin and a pair of watery eyes. Her big eyes, it was said, can seduce men at a glance, and they will think of her all their lives. However, this woman was not allowed to be touched, and they could only watch her from a distance. The men thought, how nice it would be to touch her bound feet. If not, it's okay just to admire her at a distance. Zuza herself did not know she had become the Shui Yue girl, the most admired girl by men in town. On the first weekend, when she finally sat in the room on the 2nd floor and looked out the window, she wasn't happy at all. She was shocked. Men were lining up and appeared to be in front of Akwe's Luo tea shop. They were all eager to see Zuza. Zuza eagerly looked for Gunmao in the crowd, but she could not find a trace of him. Akwe ended up hiring more lackeys. Some of them were in charge of collecting money. Some were to maintain order for the people waiting in line. Some were to count the time, and some were to guard the red line and not let men cross it. Every time Zuza moved slightly, it would arouse excitement in the spectators, and they couldn't help but want to cross the red line that was under their feet. The lackeys beat up several people who tried to cross the line in order to teach them a lesson. At the end of day 1, Akwe had made a lot of money. This had been the best day for his business since he had opened the store. All the lackeys came to congratulate him. But for some reason, Akwe couldn't be happy. On the second weekend, Akwe changed his mind. We need to limit the number of people who can see her. Unless you are well-mannered, gentle, or at least generous, you are not worthy of taking a look at the Shui-Yue girl. The lackeys didn't understand. The more people who came, the more money they made. So why limit the number of people? There is no reason, Akwe said with a sullen face. I just don't like seeing so many stinky faces, and Shui-Yue doesn't like smelling their stench. Akwe is a man of his word and is ruthless. Usually the lackeys are afraid of him, so they dare not to talk too much in front of him. He suddenly didn't want Zuza to help him make money. He just wanted to find a legitimate reason to hold her back. Akwe greeted Zuza with warmth, but he didn't even realize that there were some moments of tenderness. But Zuza didn't lift her eyelids and said coldly, "Please stay away from me. All I care is how much money you made today." Akwe said, "You are really amazing. Almost $200. Then I'll be able to pay you back soon?" she asked. "Probably not so fast, because I will only allow you to see up to 2 people a week in the future. I'm afraid you will be tired." "What do you mean?" she asked. Akwe said, "I can't stand the way those men look at you." In fact, Akwe is in love with Zuza. Although he has some money, he has never done any good business. He can get any woman he wants, but they are not worthy of being his wife. After meeting Zuza, he felt that he could no longer fool around like he used to. He had to become a decent person and marry a beautiful, clean, and educated woman. Zuza's appearance made him feel like he had encountered a golden opportunity. If he could marry Zuza, he would definitely become the most respected man in San Francisco. Ever since he was a child, Akwe had envied the men of the upper class with their fancy hats and nights spent dancing on the deck with beautiful ladies in their arms. He often wondered how good that would be if he were one of those men. But Zuza said in court that she came to find her fiancé. How can he marry her instead? First, she could not find her fiancé. Second, she had to develop a relationship with him and let her put down her guard. And third, she must never be touched. He can only endure. This is the wife who will give birth to his children in the future and become a real family member to him. Akwe's father participated in the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. After being betrayed by the rebels, the entire family was killed. When the Qing army came to arrest him, his grandmother hid him in a kiln. By the time he climbed out, he was an orphan and wandered aimlessly. At that time, he was only 9 years old. He ended up working as a laborer on a boat in Hong Kong and later followed the gold miners to San Francisco. Zuza was sitting at the window on the second floor, searching for Gunmao's figure in the crowd every single day. She didn't know where Gunmao was, but when she came out of the Luluo tea shop, where could her pair of little bound feet go? Plus, she didn't speak English. What if a foreigner robbed her? The male guests who were identified as qualified to see her could only look at Zuza through the entrance of the stairs. She hated her eyes. The men looked at her, but she turned to look at the scenery outside the window. She was calling out in her heart, "Where are you? Why haven't you come out yet? I have traveled thousands of miles to find you, but I am stuck in this small tea shop." Zuza also saw that Akwe's attitude towards her had changed, and she was very afraid of this feeling. Every day, she pushed Akwe to help her find Gunmao, and Akwe said sincerely, "I'm looking for him, and I'll let you know as soon as there is any news." One day, there was really news that someone named Gunmao was on the railway construction site, but he had been missing for almost a year. Zuza asked, "What about his brother? His brother's name is Gunshen, and he should know where he is." Akwe said with a smile. "How many people came to San Francisco with their real names?" Akwe said with a smile. "I heard that the construction head does not allow them to call each other by their real names." "Why?" she asked. "Because he said that all the Chinese workers look the same, so he made mistakes every month when checking in. Therefore, the construction head simply divided the 50 people into 3 groups. One was called Charlie, the second was called Jim, and the third was called Sam. After a long time, the Chinese workers seemed to have forgotten who they were, and when they met each other, they often just said, Zuza didn't dare to act rashly. At least there was a place to live here. She stretched her neck every day and looked out the window, wishing that every man would turn his face to be Gunmao. One day, when a boy with a white face was wandering in Chinatown, he saw the Oriental beauty in the window on the second floor at a glance. He was stunned as if he had been electrocuted. Zuza quickly looked away from him. Brighton, 17, had lost a good friend since Gunmao disappeared. Out of curiosity about the Chinese community, he often snuck out to visit Chinatown and was curious about everything he saw. On this day, when he saw Zuza's pretty figure and charming big eyes, he was immediately dumbfounded. It was the first time he had seen an Oriental beauty. He begged the security guard at the door to let him go in and see the beauty. Seeing that he was white, Akwe agreed with him and let him come in for tea, and also, of course, let him take a look at Zuza from a distance. To this end, Akwe charged a significantly high price for the tea Brighton had. But since then, Brighton had often come to the Luluo tea shop for tea, and he was fascinated by Zuza's dress, her little feet, and the fragrance that wafted from her. Chief Wolfhorse finally understood that Gunmao came to San Francisco all the way to find his missing father. He knew that he couldn't keep Gunmao, and this boy was not his real son, so he couldn't hold him in his heart. So, the tribe sent Gunmao back to the railway construction site. Gunmao really had feelings for Chief Wolfhorse, especially when they were eating together. Gunmao would say, "Your stove reminds me of the ones from my hometown." Gunmao prepared several dishes from Tang restaurant for them, and invited them to visit his hometown one day. The chief said, "Brown horse, my brown horse, we respect the laws of nature and live wherever we go. I hope we can meet again." Gunmao was sent back to the railroad site, where much had changed and the work had been done for dozens of miles. The railway company recruited a large number of Chinese workers with Cantonese and Fujian accents. Zhenshen hugged Gunmao and cried, thinking that he would never be able to see his younger brother again, and said he really regretted that he should signing the 3-year contract, and he had almost died. It turned out that one of his arms was disabled. After Gunmao left, the Chinese workers worked at Cape Horn, which was a very dangerous place. They usually had to carve out tunnels in the 70 to 80-degree cliffs and often hung in bamboo baskets, 2,000 feet high. Inch by inch, they cut small holes for explosives and ignited them. Afterwards, the Chinese workers above the cliffs needed to host his partner's bamboo basket, and the Chinese worker quickly climbed the rope to save his own life. Afterwards, the worker above the cliff needed to quickly hoist his companion's bamboo basket, and the worker on the basket quickly climbed the rope to save his life. In this way, they opened up the rock road inch by inch and used hoes, shovels, and explosives to penetrate the first tunnel in the hard granite mountain, then the second, and then the third. And when Gunmao returned to the construction site, the 8th tunnel had already been opened. But Zhenshen didn't expect that his timid brother, who opened a restaurant, would go to the other side of the world and use the gunpowder invented by his ancestors to do the most dangerous labor work. Construction head Adolf had had a fight with the engineer. In order to get through the tunnel, Adolf said, the mountain would have to be blasted open with explosives. But the engineer disagreed, for fear of causing a landslide. What if someone was hurt? He had refused to use explosives. But Adolf said indifferently, "I have experienced the battlefield. What is it to hurt a few people?" Because they couldn't agree with each other, Adolf ignored the engineer's request and imported explosives from Sweden. The engineer returned to the company headquarters to study the new solution. Zhou Banxian calculated a hexagram, saying that the mountain was the main culprit, and the ghosts were wandering everywhere, and that it was not appropriate to use explosives. But Adolf had let Zhenshen use the black powder, and he wanted to blow up the hole. Zhenshen had disagreed, saying that it was too dangerous to do so, but Adolf didn't care and ordered him to do the test. As a result, he ignited the explosive, but before they had time to run to a safe area, it had exploded, and one of his arms was broken by a falling stone. Adolf, who was leaning forward, didn't have time to escape, and was blown up on the spot and blinded in one eye. It was Zhou Banxian who helped Li Zhenshen heal his arm. He made herbal soup for him, which cured his arm, but since then, Zhenshen's arm could not move as before. The engineer was very happy to see Gunmao back. He took Gunmao home and said that he was going to rest for a few days, mainly to talk to Brighton. Since Gunmao's disappearance, Brighton's mood had been unstable. Maria thought her son had reached puberty and dared not to ask more. Without saying a word, he took Gunmao to Chinatown and wanted to show him a very mystical person.
Dad left.